Good afternoon. I'm Joe Newmeyer, film critic for New York 710 AM WOR Radio, and welcome to the Q&A for Tribes, which won Best Short Film at the Page International Screenwriting Awards, Best Short Film at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival, got most views at the LA Shorts Fest, where it also won Best Comedy, and it got Best in Fest and Best Short Film at Canada's Yes, Let's Make a Movie Festival. It deserves all of those awards. Please join me in welcoming director Nino Aldi and the film stars DeStorm Powers, who plays Jamar, Jake Hunter, who plays Kevin, and Adam Wahid, who plays Ahmed. Welcome, guys. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Got it. What's up?
Good.
Yeah.
Happy to do it. The film is so funny and so terrific and says so much, and it really does exactly what a short film should, which is it gets its ideas across, it's punchy, it's fun, and it does it all of it in such a terrifically cinematic way. Nino, let's kind of obviously just start off with the origin of it and talk about how the script came about and how the filming came about and working with this amazing cast and what some of those early conversations were like.
Well, I think, one of the first process, it kind of started with Jake and I, all three of these guys are also producers on this film. It started with us, and our goal was ultimately, we wanted to make a short film that mattered, that was award quality. So our starting point with that logic was basically to find an award-winning script. So that's when we kind of reached out to Page and read a handful of scripts. And I had spoken to the writer Andy Marlett, and I kind of gave my spin on the project and how I loved it, how it resonated with me, and we were both on the same page with it. And then I obviously took it to Jake, who then brought in Adam, who then brought in DeStorm, and we had a table read, and it was just a perfect match.
Yeah. Adam, let's jump off from that and talk about it, because I think that there's so much going on with Ahmed and obviously all three of the characters, but there's so much that has to kind of get conveyed so quickly. What were some kind of shortcuts for you to kind of make sure that we kind of understood where he was coming from, where Ahmed was coming from right off the bat?
Yeah, I think at first, just with all three of the characters, you don't really know who these guys are. They all seem dangerous. Of course, we're all in there with guns, sticking up the train. So you don't really get to know anybody towards, the middle and towards the end. And you start to realize, Ahmed's character and kind of his trajectory is, he doesn't really want to do this, right? And, as time goes along, he starts to open up his eyes and see what's in front of him, and it's not something that he wants to be a part of, but he's almost gone too far and has to do it. So that's kind of how the arc of the character was in my eyes for Ahmed.
Yeah, I also love how there's obviously such a terrific shorthand between the three of you, but it also feels like when the line of get a map, Kevin, there's sort of that sense of, the conversations haven't gone too far amongst these guys to actually kind of go into their backstories. So it's sort of a nice sort of back and forth in terms of getting to know them as they're sort of in some ways getting to know aspects of each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, at first, you have the obvious, separation of subgroups and stereotypes. And then as you go along, you start to realize who everyone is, who's who, and it gets deeper and deeper. And what you might have thought at first, you don't know who's identifying as what or who believes in what, who has this belief or stereotype. So things start to unfold, and it gets interesting.
Yeah. DeStorm, and that's Jamar is also the contradictions that are within that character are terrific as well, because we're looking at him as he kind of comes at that moment and he says, you know what, I'm not going to jack these guys. And then, but he is the one who sort of kind of calls out the individual versus the subgroups, and the conversation sort of starts. Did you kind of have a good feel for sort of where he would be? He kind of straddles a line, like in the first third of the film, he kind of has like a bit of an arc and then a realization himself about what he needs to believe and kind of say, right?
Yeah, I think with Jamar, it was a lot easy for me to do because of, with my upbringing, a lot of things that's going on in the world today, and just reflecting with everything that has to do with, racial, injustice and the diverse groups that's happening, the BLM. So it was easy to bring that character to life. And then throughout the arc, he starts to realize, wow, wait, there's a lot of people dealing with a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it was one of those rude awakenings, as they say. He's on the train like, oh, wait, I guess I'm not the only one.
Right, right. I also love how he code switches at that moment, where he's sort of like, after giving this kind of long-winded sort of pontification about all the theories, they're looking at him and he says, like sort of the sense of, isn't everybody with me on this? Can't we all just sort of get on the same line with this? I love that sort of sense that he maybe has these other two guys with him, but they maybe are not necessarily on the same path in terms of thinking, right?
Right, because it almost like picks on another stereotype. Like you will look at these guys, it's like these guys are robbers. They can't be educated. So it's like I'll take the Jamar character, and then he gives you this long speech, and it's like, oh my God, these guys do know what they know what the hell they're talking about. So I thought it was just dope that that character had so much depth, because you wouldn't expect it to come from that guy.
Yeah, yeah. It has kind of a Coen Brothers quality in some ways, which I really love. There's sort of this sense of like the unexpected coming from the expected, or vice versa. Yeah. And Jake, every comedy trio has to have sort of a classic confused guy, and I think in some ways Kevin is that guy here. There's sort of that sense of, as he's kind of coming around, you sort of start to see the lights going on in his head as he's kind of realizing some of these things, right? There's an aspect to him of enlightenment in the moment, in the 10 minutes that we're watching him. He's figuring stuff out that he had never thought about, right?
Trying to figure it out. I would say out of all the characters, my arc is like pretty much the same as I go through. Mm-hmm. But it's cool because a lot of people in real life, are like that. They just are stubborn, and they are how they are, and they may not try to figure things out like Ahmed did, or they may not be like as educated like Jamar. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's just I got to play somebody who was kind of like that, and there are a lot of people out there, so it was cool to do that.
Yeah. The interplay between all three of you, did you guys kind of have a good kind of sense of kind of and was it workshopping, as it were, kind of figuring out sort of even body language and blocking and how things would go, because it's really the three of you play off of each other so beautifully?
Yeah, I would think that it was almost natural, because there were a lot of moments that we have. There was one moment that me and Jake shared where we looked at each other and we didn't even time it. It was just, we were just on beat every time when it happened. And it was just like perfect, a perfect film romance. Yeah. Romance.
There's also like there's a great amount of physicality between the three of you also as well. Like obviously everyone's going back and forth, but even just sort of like just kind of being able to kind of stand there, it's so beautifully cut and edited as well. We're able to kind of capture all of your thoughts going across your faces. But there's a lot of physicality to the performances, right?
There's a lot of movement. There was a lot of back and forth. I think we shot the scenes of groups moving back and forth quite a bit, so it kind of got crowded. There's a lot of traffic on that train, but yeah, it definitely a lot of movement. And I think that's what kind of added a lot to the film. That physical movement. It really made it visual.
Yeah, including even when there's not, Jake, right? When there's sort of that sense of you with the European guy, when you look at each other and you say, I thought there'd be more of us. There's sort of that sense of even staying still can have a dynamism to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we're, creating those kind of like powerful moments. There doesn't need to be too much that goes on in order for those messages to come through.
Yeah. Let's talk about, because I love them all. The quick cutting was sort of in some ways the heart of the film. Obviously, dog versus cat, dualism versus nihilism, Starbucks versus NASCAR, and Moonlight versus La La Land. All right, Moonlight over here, La La Land over here. It's so terrific. Let's kind of talk about just the creation of that terrific kind of heart of the film and what went into it.
Well, ultimately that came down to the writing from the script. I wish I could take credit for that. It was all Andy. I think, my intention obviously was to try to hit the tone of what was going on without being too heavy-handed. So I saw it as a gritty thriller where I want to keep the low angles at the beginning of the movie to then kind of, eventually put some craft in it, come on the level and sort of tell that story there. And I wanted to try to keep the blocking where they start out not really unified. And the idea would be just to unify, right? So, and that was sort of my whole angle. And you needed to use a lot of cuts, and you needed to use a lot of cutaways to the passengers because they're not quite unifying. So the lines I thought were brilliantly written, because basically it towed the line so well of really what's going on in the heart of what tribalism even means. So I felt like the actors did their part, and we were just trying to capture it once we were ready to light, ultimately. So, and this the story speaks for itself.
Yeah, I love even how we kind of get introed into it by kind of, it's almost, it feels almost like there's a beautiful quality of as if we just we happen to be on that train. There's a randomness to it because now we're suddenly behind one of them as they're walking onto it, and we're just another subway passenger on that train, which I think is terrific. Yeah.
It's one of those things that they always say, it's like it's the hardest thing, honestly, is like when you're reading a script, it's like, how do you introduce characters? Who's important? What does it mean? Like in the quick sentences. And once that was done, it's like, this person's important, that person's important, this guy's important, and they're up to no good. And then therefore, I think it kind of sets the tone for the whole film. So that's all I can do, really.
Yeah, yeah. I want to also touch on that because it's part of the magic of it is it's not shot on an actual subway car, though it is absolutely realistic, and it feels exactly like you're on any subway train in New York City. Talk about the filming of it on what train you were stationary on.
Well, honestly, essentially, we were trying to find a practical location, and we found it to be quite difficult just because of lighting or the noise or what goes on. And then it got, obviously with short films, you have limited budget. So our option was to build a train in 1 week. So we kind of did, and
a platform.
And a platform, yeah. And
Don't
somehow,
forget the platform.
right. So, I mean, using the old classic, movie magic where you have your exterior shot in New York, which we knew we were going to get. I wasn't trying to mimic the orange line, but we were going to go with the teal and orange sort of color grade. So I talked with the production designer to sort of keep it, consistent, to get more of a cinematic look. And then we built it. And to me, you can tell. So it's one of the great things that everyone else can't. So honestly, like that was probably the hardest challenge because these guys were rehearsing, these guys were on point, and if they weren't, it would have been tough because a lot of what I had to do early on was actually get that thing lit properly to give the effect.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, and the way the lights keep kind of going through it. There's a taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 aspect to it, which I think is really terrific. It has sort of a 70s thriller feel to it, despite the comedy that's going on between everybody. There is sort of this sense of, as the lights are going by, the tension is getting higher, which is great.
I think the supporting actors sold it as a New York City train as well. I lived in New York for 10 years, and getting on and off those trains for 10 years, just seeing the diversity and the melting pot of people that New York has to offer, having that many people on the train made it feel like New York, and you didn't really pay much attention to the faults of whether the train wasn't a New York City train. So it just being that so many diverse people and so packed, you say this is New York. It sold it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point to actually wrap up on. I'll ask all of you about it because it does have such a New York feel. And, it does feel like the Orange Line going down from 6th Avenue. And it also feels like from the passengers just being sort of blasé about it, kind of waiting for the robbery to be done. Classic New York sort of feel of like, just let things happen. It'll all be done in 5 minutes. Let's kind of talk about how you guys wanted to make sure that it kind of had that New York feel to it and kind of really had hit all those New York beats.
Yeah, I think for me,
I'll go ahead.
Well, I just was to say, I think for me, what felt real to me was the randomness of the passengers, because you had some people who just didn't care. I mean, like we see this all the time, and then you had people who wanted to get their point across, and then everyone had an opinion. So it was, and in New York, everyone has an opinion. It's not like, if you get on a train in certain cities where they don't say something. The fact that everyone had something to say felt New York, because they're like, I'm gonna say what I gotta say. I don't care, whatever. We see this all the time.
Yeah. Adam, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, just to piggyback off DeStorm, I was born and raised in New York, Queens, Flushing, and I still don't know how the subway works. I still get confused, but yeah, I think it's more so about the people that are on the train rather than the actual train. You get on the New York, especially in Queens, like you get on the subway, you see everything and anything, and nothing is a surprise. You see somebody fighting, you'll see homeless people, you'll see anything.
Dancers.
Dancers, performers. So it's just like another day in New York. And I think the way, we were able to cast all the background in the cart is really what gave it that New York feel, because, you know, you had a little bit of everything, and, you know, nothing comes as a surprise in New York on that subway.
Yeah, yeah. Jake, how about you in terms of its New Yorkiness?
Yeah, I mean, I was not worried about any of our performances. Like, I knew DeStorm and Adam could act, and I wasn't worried about that at all. But this was the first time casting something for me, and I was like, I was not worried about performances. I was just like, please let this look like a New York subway. You know, I was like just hoping that everyone would look good and everything. And we had some really talented actors that came out for one line for 2 days, you know, from like TV series and coming from prestigious schools and stuff like that. And that's the other thing, is like, it wasn't just like their look, is like there were some really talented people that were coming too for 1 or 2 days for barely any lines, you know, so that definitely helped as well.
Yeah, we should say that this incredible supporting cast that's around you guys, right, with just 1 or 2 lines of "I'm European, we're complicated," or anything that they all say, they have them all spot on. It's so terrific. And Nino, to wrap up in terms of its New York feeling, kind of the whole kind of tapestry of it, kind of making sure all those dots were crossed and those T's were crossed, as it were, the New Yorkiness of it.
Yeah, honestly, I think for me, I mean, the original script was in Atlanta, and I remember as we, you know, brought it to the team, you know, producers I know, because those, you know, especially Adam was from New York, it kind of made sense. And to me, it sort of makes sense. I've actually never been to New York City personally, which is strange because I have the Italian. I'm like a Midwest Italian. You know, that's my tribe.
You gotta go visit.
That's my subgroup. I'm Midwest Italian. That bothers a lot of people. I'm like, listen, but I feel like the heart of our story makes the most sense with New York, because basically it's the melting pot. It's literally about the diverse aspect, and basically not necessarily identifying with who aren't you like. It's like we are all sort of the same kind of. So I felt, because of the diversity of the New York platform, it made the most sense to me. And I was relying, because the actors, I don't have to go out there and act, and they all were familiar with New York. So as long as those guys get it, I can assume that from my perspective that it must be somewhat accurate. So that's why
it
New York
absolutely is.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, it made me. I haven't been in the city in a while. It made me miss the city, and it, you know, that's the highest compliment in so many ways, I think, because it's there's so much going on in there. Thank you guys all for being here so much. The film is really terrific. The short film is called Tribes. Director Nino Aldi, DeStorm Powers, Jake Hunter, Adam Waheed. Thank you guys so much for being here, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.